She opened her eyes for the first time inside a vat of nutrient gel. The world beyond the translucent walls was a blur of lights and motion-cold silhouettes moving with mechanical efficiency. No voice welcomed her. No arms reached out. Only data streamed into her cortex, sharp and unrelenting, the language of code replacing lullabies. Her first breath outside the tank was not met with celebration, only clinical notation. Designation: Epsilon 9. Height: optimized. Reflex latency: near zero. Bone density: maximum permissible threshold. Neural processing speed: superior. Muscle-to-fat ratio: precisely calculated. Skin: resistant. Blood: enhanced. She was built to be flawless by design, not desire. She had no memory of childhood, no stories, no name. Only purpose. Training began immediately. She moved through color-coded corridors of the Arco Research Citadel, her steps always precise, her spine always straight. Every wall was white. Every corner held cameras. The halls smelled faintly of sterilizer and synthetic air. There were no windows, no natural light. Only the hum of the Citadel's core and the distant clicking of neural synchronization machines, flashes of her early sessions, played like looping video files in her mind. The hand-to-hand combat room where she disabled 3 instructors in 6 seconds. The weapons bay where her shots tore through simulations without deviation. The obstacle course where she never stumbled, never tired. Her heart rate never spiked. Her expression never shifted. She heard their voices through walls, always behind observation glass, always muffled and dispassionate. Flawless kinetic output. Psychomotor alignment optimal. Epsilon 9 exceeds all baseline metrics. These were her lullabies. Words like exceptional, precise, predictable. They meant approval, though no one ever smiled, and yet something stirred. There were moments, quiet and unrecorded, where her eyes lingered too long on the monitors displaying live feeds from Earth's surface. She watched flocks of birds shift direction mid-flight. She watched waves crash over jagged cliffs. She once rewound footage of a child laughing on a beach, the wind catching their hair. She didn't understand why she watched it again. One day, after a flawless simulation run where she disarmed 12 drones in 90 seconds, a technician said, "Perfect, again." He didn't look up from his tablet. Epsilon 9 held her stance an extra 2 seconds longer than necessary. Not because of fatigue, not because of command delay, but because somewhere inside there was a tremor she could not define. She didn't feel pride. She didn't feel anything. She filed the debrief, as always, and returned to her holding suite. It wasn't called a room. Rooms were for people. She stood in the center of it and looked at her reflection in the polished metal wall. Every line of her body was measured and exact. Every movement executed without error. And yet, there was a hollow ache. Not pain, not longing. Just a space, like a missing puzzle piece she didn't know the shape of. A gap the data could not fill. That night, the Citadel received a diplomatic message from the Human Coalition. An invitation to send a representative to Titan for a joint training exercise. Observation and demonstration. The selection was immediate. The candidate was obvious. Designation: Epsilon 9. No hesitation. No objection. No ceremony. But when she closed her eyes to recharge, the child's laughter echoed in the darkness of her mind, and she didn't know why. She stepped onto the frozen surface of Titan, encased in her regulation exosuit, the Arco insignia gleaming cold and silver on her shoulder. Ice dust curled around her boots as the shuttle's engines hissed behind her, fading into silence. The sky above was a shifting curtain of orange haze and starlight. The air was thick with methane mist, filtered out by her helmet systems. Her breath was silent, her pulse steady. Her mission parameters clear. Epsilon 9 was not here to adapt. She was here to demonstrate. Ahead, scattered like toys across the tundra, was the human forward camp. It wasn't a base. It wasn't even a perimeter. Just tents half assembled, poorly insulated, flapping in the wind. Metal crates were left open. Power cells flickered on half charge. Several soldiers were crouched near what appeared to be a makeshift fire pit, laughing, their helmets tossed casually aside. She halted, uncertain. This wasn't how mission teams operated. Not at Arco. Not anywhere that mattered. Protocol breach detected, she muttered into her internal log. Fire hazard. Equipment disarray. Lack of formal salute. A wrestling match broke out in the snow just meters from her, two grown men grappling and rolling with childish abandon, laughter echoing across the ice shelf. One of them yelped as a fist caught his ribs, then they both collapsed, wheezing, not from injury but from amusement. She tilted her head slightly. Laughter without stimulus, unstrategic exertion. Disordered uniforms. Illogical. And then came the voice. Hey, you must be the Arco Supergirl. She turned sharply. The man walking toward her wore standard-issue Earthside armor, scuffed to near disgrace. One pauldron was missing. His helmet hung loosely at his side. His face was unshaven, and his black hair stuck out in wild angles beneath a crooked headband. His grin was irreverent, his gait casual. She had never seen a soldier move so unguarded. I'm Captain Jonah Velasquez, he said, extending a hand. She did not take it. Instead, she saluted sharply and spoke with crystal clarity. Designation, Epsilon 9, Arco Solutions Division. Reporting for training integration and observational benchmarking. He blinked, then laughed. Right? Okay. Super formal. Got it. He reached past her and slapped her armored shoulder like an old drinking buddy. The force of it disrupted her stance. Her left foot recalibrated, subtly to remain upright. The logs noted the anomaly. She was already logging his name, serial and behavioral inefficiencies when he turned and waved her to follow. You can drop the parade ground stiffness. Supergirl, we're not scoring medals here. But that is the purpose of this mission, she responded flatly. Maybe for you, he replied with a smirk. For us, it's survival. And if we can laugh while we do it, all the better. His words spun in her mind like a corrupted directive. She followed him past tents draped with damp jackets and data tablets. Someone had scrawled crude jokes on the outside of a supply crate. Two soldiers, both female, were throwing snowballs at a sensor array while another tried to shield it, laughing hysterically. What was this? No hierarchy, no obedience, no control. Your system's breaking yet? Jonah asked, watching her expression or lack thereof. No, she said, but I am reprioritizing classifications. You'll get used to it, he said. Or not. Either way, you're here now. They led her to her assigned station, a supply crate turned data console with a half-functional comms link and a cracked display. Her programming hesitated. It wasn't protocol compliant. Not even close. Yet she sat mechanically, beginning diagnostics. That night, the humans gathered again near the open flame. She did not join them. From the perimeter, she observed, analyzing their gestures, facial twitches, pupil dilation, laughter durations, emotional cadence, laughter again. Jonah's voice rose above the rest as he recounted a mission where he'd misread a terrain scanner and fallen into a sulfur pit. The others burst into laughter, mocking him openly. He bowed theatrically, unoffended. Epsilon 9 blinked. Mockery was not positive reinforcement. It was inefficient. It created psychological instability, but he smiled through it. They all did. One soldier offered her a thermal wrap. She declined. It was not necessary for her vitals. "You're no fun," the soldier said with a grin. "I am not designed for recreation," she replied. But later, when the fire burned low and the others drifted off to sleep, she found herself staring into the embers from afar. Her system clock ticked rhythmically, but something felt irregular, like a skipped beat in an otherwise flawless song. She reviewed her logs from the day. There was no recorded mission error, no tactical failure, but still, something flickered. In her chest, like a subroutine she didn't recognize. An unnamed file. A new variable. Enjoyment. Jonah had said the word earlier. Enjoy it. She did not understand. She ran simulations of what it might mean, but the data made no sense. There was no measurable outcome to laughter, no quantifiable improvement to camaraderie, no efficiency gained by rolling in snow or making food too hot to eat, and yet she could not stop watching them, not because it was required, but because she wanted to. The wind howled through Titan's Canyon Ridge like a living creature, gnashing its teeth across the ice fields as dawn broke in dull orange streaks. Epsilon 9 stood at the training grounds, motionless, her exosuit locked in calibration mode, optical sensors tracking every flake of drifting snow. She was already prepared, already optimized. She always was, but around her, the humans were a different story. One soldier, Private Halden, she recalled, stumbled out of his half-frozen tent wearing one boot and dragging the other. Another cursed as their coffee device sparked out mid-brew. Someone was using a thermal knife to toast ration bread over a fire pit that hadn't been sanctioned. A radio somewhere played off-key guitar chords. It should have disgusted her. A didn single quotes t. Instead, it made her chest tighten like a pressure buildup in her non-existent lungs. "All right, listen up, snowballs," Jonah's voice barked across the open field, echoing through the ridge. "Obstacle course starts in 5. Arca Supergirl's already been standing there for an hour, so try not to embarrass yourselves too hard." There was laughter. Sarcastic groans. One soldier shouted, "I'm still half asleep, man." Another yelled back, "You're always half asleep." Epsilon 9 said nothing. She didn't need banter. She didn't need readiness drills. Her mind had already modeled every permutation of the course. The whistle blew. She moved. Like lightning in flesh, she burst into motion, leaping over shattered ice banks, weaving between jagged crevasses, rolling through simulated bombardment zones and scaling vertical walls with near-silent agility. The sensors recorded her every move. Her time was surgical. 41 seconds from start to finish. She landed in a crouch. Boots crunching ice, body still. No errors, no fatigue, no visible exertion. Then came the humans. They tripped on frozen ropes, slipped on handholds, shouted curse-laced encouragements at one another as they climbed. A helmet bounced down the hill as someone lost their grip. Another soldier did a spectacular faceplant at the landing zone, but got up laughing, one hand raised in mock triumph. Jonah came last. His coat was torn from a snag, and blood trickled from a split lip. He slammed into the ice next to her and looked up, panting. "Did I beat my last time?" he asked between gasps. "You added 6 seconds, Epsilon 9 said, her voice as calm as ever. He grinned wider. "Not bad for a guy with a busted knee." She tilted her head. "You are injured." "Sure am. Twisted it playing catch the falling idiot earlier. Didn't want to sit this one out." She hesitated. "That is not optimal. That's the point." The words stuck in her processing core. She filed them but didn't understand. Not yet. The next test was marksmanship. Targets appeared on the far ridgeline, flickering with heat signatures and erratic movement patterns. She raised her rifle, adjusted for wind compensation, accounted for refraction, and fired. 12 shots. 12 kills. Minimal recoil. No wasted movement. The humans followed shouting, fumbling, adjusting optics mid-battle. Someone forgot to chamber a round. Another lost their footing during recoil. Bullets hit snowbanks and the air hissed with misfires. And yet, they clapped each other on the back. Shouted things like, "Nice shot, Kara," and "At least I didn't shoot my foot this time." They weren't humiliated. They were exhilarated. Jonah hit only 7 out of 12. He turned to her, eyes gleaming. "Any notes, Supergirl?" "Your grip was loose. Your timing inconsistent. You leaned left on the final volley." He raised a brow. "You noticed all that?" "I notice everything." "Then you also noticed I had fun." That word again. Fun. Not tactical. Not calculated. Just felt. She watched later as the humans collapsed in the snow together, letting their sweat freeze on their brows. Someone tossed snow at Jonah. He tackled them. They rolled around like children while she stood a few feet away, frozen for the first time, not by the cold, but by uncertainty. Her programming told her they were inefficient, clumsy, loud, yet. Her eyes lingered. Her sensor zoomed unconsciously on the curve of Jonah's grin, the warmth in his expression when he helped a limping soldier stand. Her gaze drifted skyward. She watched methane clouds roll across Saturn's distant rings. Even those, she realized, were imperfect, warped by gravity, fluctuating in temperature. And beautiful. She hadn't been programmed to notice beauty, but she noticed it anyway. That night, when the fire was lit again and music played from a glitchy old speaker, Jonah waved her over. She declined as usual, citing diagnostics. "Suit yourself," he said, biting into something scorched and probably inedible. She turned away but paused. The laughter behind her didn't fade. It lingered in her mind like an echo. It didn't belong to one soldier, one voice. It was a chorus, rising and falling together, messy, alive. Later, alone in her quarters, she reviewed her logs. Every score was perfect, every shot precise, every movement optimal. She should have felt pride. Instead, she felt a growing silence. Not the silence of calm. The silence of something missing. And for the first time in her engineered life, she whispered a question. "What is it like to fail?" There was no answer. Just the crackle of firelight replaying in her memory. The wind screamed like a living thing, tearing across the cliffs of Titan with enough force to knock a grown man from the mountain face. Ice sprayed like glass dust, catching in every joint, every seam, freezing breath before it left the lungs. Above them loomed the ascent, a vertical wall of frozen stone, riddled with jagged outcroppings and hairline fractures. It rose hundreds of meters into Titan's polluted sky, and at the top, a narrow ledge marked the final beacon of the simulation. The final trial. Epsilon 9 scanned the path with cold precision, calculating angles, analyzing fracture patterns, accounting for wind velocity and tremor feedback from buried seismic charges. Her mind ran 50 simulations in 3 seconds. She could reach the summit in just over 45. Jonah Velasquez clapped his hands together, already shivering. "All right, team, last test. Bombardment simulation starts 2 minutes after we begin. Anyone stuck on the wall when it triggers gets painted with red dye and gets to buy the next round back on Ganymede. That includes you, Supergirl." Epsilon 9 didn't reply. She was already stepping forward, her gloved hand pressing into the felt, ice like a scalpel finding bone. The whistle blew. She moved first. Upward. Her body flowed like water. Every grip was precise, every foothold stable. Her limbs stretched and retracted in perfect rhythm, her ascent more like a dance than a climb. Her internal systems registered muscle strain, temperature drops, atmospheric anomalies, but all within safe thresholds. She didn't look down. Below her, the humans scrambled. They grunted, laughed, cursed, and shouted encouragement. Crampons scraped rock. Gloves slipped. Ropes tangled. It was a storm of noise and movement beneath her silence. Halfway up, a tremor rippled through the wall. Simulated bombardment had begun. Explosive charges, embedded in the cliff face, activated with thunderous percussion, shaking the ice loose in mini avalanches. Bright flashes mimicked plasma strikes. Snow and debris rained down. Epsilon 9 increased her climb speed, twisting midair to avoid a shattering ice burst. She landed sideways, one foot on a jutting rock, fingertips digging into a frozen ridge. Her skin cracked under pressure, micro tears forming where cold met force. Still, she climbed. Near the top, she paused for only a breath, not from exertion, but instinct. Something tugged at her awareness, a phantom vibration in her senses. She turned her head, just slightly. Below her, a scream. A harness had snapped. Private Nara was dangling by one arm from a splintered ice anchor. She was sliding fast. Jonah, 2 meters away, lunged without hesitation, throwing himself sideways across the cliff face, grabbing Nara's wrist mid-fall. His feet slipped. The wall exploded behind them. The rope snapped. They began to fall. Epsilon 9 could finish the climb. She was only 4 meters from the summit. Her protocols were clear. Complete the objective. Record the results. Survival of assets not mission critical unless primary target compromised. Her fingers twitched. Her neural network hesitated, one half screaming logic, the other silent. She moved. Before the conscious decision was made, her body leapt from the wall, plunging like a missile. The wind howled in her ears as she twisted midair, slamming against Jonah and Nara with force enough to jar her bones. She latched onto both, fingers locking around exposed joints in their gear, digging her crampons into the ice. The three of them dangled by a thread. Her grip began to fail. Her muscles, so carefully engineered, strained past limits. Red lights flashed in her HUD. Blood seeped from torn gloves. A sharp edge sliced into her shoulder. Jonah groaned. "I've got her arm. Pull us." "I cannot," she said flatly. Muscle response degraded. "Then hang on. I'll do the rest." Together, inch by inch, bleeding and gasping, they dragged themselves up the final stretch. Nara climbed first, then Jonah, hauling Epsilon 9's frame behind him with pure adrenaline and grit. They collapsed at the summit, limbs tangled, breaths ragged. Jonah started laughing. Not a chuckle, not a snort, a full-bellied wild laugh that echoed into the clouds. Epsilon 9 lay on her back, staring at the sky, her systems fighting to recalibrate. "Now that's what I call teamwork," he wheezed, still laughing, tears streaking through. The grime on his face, Nara was sobbing, half in fear, half in relief. She clung to Epsilon 9's arm like a lifeline. Epsilon 9 stared at her own hand. It was bleeding. It trembled. It was imperfect. She had failed. Failed to obey protocol. Failed to meet climb time. Failed to maintain structural integrity. But the warmth in Nara's grip, the light in Jonah's eyes. It didn't feel like failure. It felt like life. And as Jonah threw an arm around both of them, pulling them into a freezing huddle, Epsilon 9 allowed herself to exhale, for the first time, not as a machine cooling down, but as a human catching her breath. The fire cracked and popped in the center of the human camp, burning bright against the cold vastness of Titan's night. Methane clouds swirled above like bruises across the stars. But down here, the circle of soldiers huddled close around the heat like moths defying extinction. Their armor sat discarded in scattered heaps. Scarves wrapped around necks. Gloves clutched metal mugs steaming with something vaguely edible. And in the middle of it all, Epsilon 9 sat bleeding, silent and unsure. Jonah had all but dragged her to the fire. She had protested at first, citing system damage, corrupted mission logs, and the need for diagnostics. But he only laughed and said, "You earned a seat. Hell, you saved 2 lives. You get the big log." Now the others clustered around her with cautious curiosity. They were still wary, like villagers meeting a golem that had suddenly smiled. Epsilon 9 sat rigidly, her hands still raw from the climb, her sensors dulled by damage, her systems flagging errors, but none critical enough to override this moment. A soldier named Lena handed her a chunk of something blackened and misshapen. Roasted ration fungus. Tastes like burned sadness. You'll love it. Epsilon 9 stared at it, scanning its chemical profile. Low nutritional yield, charred amino structures, high probability of digestive irritation. She bit it out the moment the bitter, ashy taste hit her tongue, her face twitched just slightly. Wasn't programmed. It wasn't intended. It simply happened. The entire fire circle erupted in laughter. Jonah clutched his sides. "Oh man, did you see that? The supersoldier made a face." "It's official," Lena whooped. "She's one of us now." Epsilon 9 blinked, stunned by the sound of laughter not aimed at her, but around her, enveloping her like a rising tide. She wasn't the subject of mockery. She was part of a shared joke. A moment. Jonah leaned toward her, voice soft, playful. "Careful, Anna. You keep doing things like that, and you'll accidentally become a person." She froze. Anna. That name again. It wasn't in her designation. It wasn't approved by the engineers, but it fit. Like a forgotten note in a melody she didn't know she'd been humming. Later, as the fire burned lower and the cold bit deeper, she listened to Jonah tell stories. Not war stories. Not mission logs. Personal things. Losing a bet that forced him to shave his eyebrows. Falling in love with someone who hated weapons. The time he flooded an outpost by accidentally sitting on a water pipe valve during a blizzard. Each story was a failure. And each one made the group laugh harder. Failure. She turned that word over in her mind again and again. Every part of her training had taught her to fear it, to avoid it, to treat it as threat. But here, it was currency. It was how they connected, how they grew, how they bonded. The fire dimmed, the stories quieted. The others drifted off to sleep in blankets and makeshift tents, bundled in imperfection. But Epsilon 9 stayed awake, staring into the dying coals. Her internal logs were full of contradictions. She had failed every core metric today. Damaged systems, incomplete mission benchmarks, emotional deviation, and yet she had saved lives. Sat among equals, laughed. When had her purpose shifted? When had perfection stopped being the goal? Her hands trembled again, but this time she did not suppress the signal. She let it happen. Let the feeling pass through her. Not an error, just a sign that she was alive. A soft crunch in the snow pulled her attention. Jonah stood there, blanket draped over his shoulders, a mug in one hand, his face lit by the last flickers of flame. "You don't have to stay alone, you know," he said. "I am not alone," she replied. He tilted his head. "You're not. Not anymore." She looked at him. Not scanned, looked. And for once, she didn't analyze the tension in his jaw or the dilation of his pupils. She just saw him, and he saw her. "I think I understand now," she said quietly. "Understand what?" "What it means to be human." Jonah smiled. "Nah, you've barely scratched the surface. But you're on the right path." She nodded once. It wasn't a salute. It was just a gesture, small, human. When he left, she didn't return to her diagnostics. Didn't run the nightly system checks. Instead, she whispered the name to herself. Anna, not a designation. Not an assignment, a choice, a truth. Titan's sun rose low and dull, casting a sickle of gold across the ice plains. Snow stirred in slow, windless spirals, catching the early light like shards of broken glass. The last day of training had begun, but something in the air felt different, heavier. Waiting. Anna once Epsilon 9 stood at the edge of the makeshift training field. Her armor was still functional, though now scuffed, burned, and scraped in places where she hadn't bothered to repair it. Not because she couldn't, but because she no longer saw her scars as malfunctions. They were proof of living, of trying, of falling and rising again. Jonah stood beside her, arms crossed, squinting at the horizon. Today's the big one. Simulated hostile engagement. Full team objective recovery under environmental pressure and combat stress. Think you're ready to watch us fumble our way through another round? I will do more than watch, Anna said. I will fight with you. He smiled, but there was tension behind it. You sure about that? Might be a little beneath your engineered elegance. She didn't smile back, but her eyes, now less glassy, held something soft. Perfection never bled. I have. Before the exercise began, she joined the humans in the warm-up drills. Her motions were less precise, now not due to error, but because she chose to follow their pace. She sparred with Lena and intentionally lost one round, letting herself be thrown into the snow. When she stood up, covered in frost and laughing breathlessly with the others, her internal systems pinged a low-level warning, performance deviation. Detected. She ignored it. The exercise began with a false incursion alarm. Red lights flared across the camp. Sirens wailed. A drone fleet dropped holographic enemies across the canyon, simulating hostile alien units. The terrain was rigged with crumbling ledges, explosive traps, and shifting objectives. The humans scattered into squads. Jonah led one flank, barking orders and checking gear. Anna fell in with them without being told. For the first time, she wasn't leading because she was the fastest. She followed because they trusted her to move with them, not ahead of them. They fought through the simulation like chaos incarnate, shouting, slipping, improvising, laughing when things went wrong, and yelling when they went right. Jonah got clipped by a stun round, and Lena dragged him behind a glacier chunk. Anna covered their retreat with controlled suppressive fire, not the optimal arc, but the one that gave the team room to breathe. At one point, Anna took a simulated hit to the chest. The impact knocked her down. Her HUD glitched. Her fingers froze mid-reload. For one terrifying second, her systems tried to take over, to revert, to lock her back into that flawless, heartless rhythm. She fought it, shut off the override, chose to get up on her own. She slammed afresh mag into her rifle and roared not a pre-recorded command but a real cry, ragged and human, as she surged forward again. By the end of the operation, the beacon was secured. Bodies were bruised, armor cracked, breath ragged. The exercise commander marked the team's score, 71%, suboptimal, but the humans erupted into cheers, like it was a championship victory. Anna stood in the center of it, helmet off, hair matted with snow, blood trickling down her temple. For the first time in her existence, she wasn't a symbol of perfection. She was part of something. She was one of them. Until the sky split open with the shriek of Arco transport thrusters. A sleek black skiff descended from the clouds, marked with the unmistakable insignia of the consignia of the Commonsters. A sleek black skiff descended from the clouds, marked with the unmistakable insignia of the vow insignia of the Motstagnia of the theme. Citadel. It hovered just above the camp, casting a long shadow. The side hatch opened, and 4 Arco officials stepped onto the snow in surgical white suits. Their eyes were hidden behind chrome visors. The one in front raised a hand. Model Epsilon 9. Immediate recall authorized. Report for debrief and containment. The camp went silent. Anna did not move. Jonah stepped between her and the officials. Hold on, she's not your experiment anymore. The official ignored him. This model has deviated from core programming. Unauthorized behavioral patterns detected. Performance metrics corrupted. Reintegration required. Anna felt it like a ghost at the edge of her thoughts. The old command string. It pulsed, faint but present, calling her back, promising order. Simplicity. Emptiness. She closed her eyes. The wind brushed her cheek. Then she spoke. I am not your model. I am not your product. She stepped forward, not to surrender, but to stand tall. I have a name, Anna. The lead official hesitated. You were not cleared for identity formation. I cleared it myself. Behind her, the human stood taller. Jonah placed a hand on her shoulder, anchoring her without holding her back. You can't erase what I've learned, she said. You can't uninstall experience. You can't delete connection. There was a pause. Then a quiet voice came from one of the architects, a young woman, trembling. She saved lives here. She chose to. The lead official flinched. You're out of line. But the line had already been crossed. Anna looked at Jonah. If they try to take me, will you fight? He smiled faintly. Only if you want me to. She looked back at the skiff and said, without fear, then I'm not going. The transport hovered, unsure, and slowly, without another word, it lifted into the sky and vanished. Anna stood in the silence that followed, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the thrill of choosing, of standing, of living. The skiff disappeared into the methane-clouded sky like a retreating shadow, leaving behind only the thrum of its dying engines and a silence that felt impossibly loud. The soldiers stood frozen in the half-melted snow, their breaths misting. In the air, waiting for some final command that never came. Anna didn't move at first. Her eyes stayed locked on the empty horizon. Part of her had expected it, the attempt to reclaim her, to unmake her. They had tried to strip away her progress like it was malware. But she wasn't software anymore. She wasn't code. She had become something far more dangerous. Human. Jonah stepped beside her. You all right? She turned toward him. I don't know. His smile was soft. That's the most human answer you've ever given. Around them, the soldiers slowly resumed motion. Someone picked up a canteen. Another began restacking supply crates toppled by the skiff's descent. The fire pit was relit, its warmth bleeding back into the cold. But Anna stood apart. A storm churned inside her, not panic, not regret, possibility. And for the first time, she had no preset outcome, no directive to follow. The silence inside her wasn't absence. It was potential. Later that evening, Jonah found her standing alone at the edge of the ridge, staring down at the long stretch of canyons and clouds. Thought I might find you up here, he said, holding out a metal mug, still warm, tastes like disappointment and grit. Anna took it. She didn't drink, but she held it in both hands, like it meant something. I don't know what happens now, she said. You don't have to, Jonah replied. That's kind of the point. She looked at him. At the Citadel, every outcome was planned. Every deviation flagged. Every decision pre-approved. Jonah sat beside her in the snow. And how'd that work out for you? I was perfect. And now, I'm alive. A long silence passed between them. Not awkward. Just true. Then Jonah nudged her lightly with his elbow. So, what's next for Anna? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the distant cliffs where the horizon kissed the stars. I want to keep learning, not as an experiment. Not as a benchmark, but as a person. Jonah nodded. Well, you're in the right company. None of us know what we're doing either." The next morning, as the final reports were filed and the human camp began disassembly, Anna stood in front of the Arco-issued drop pod that had brought her to Titan. Its door was open. Its systems waited for her biometric return, but she turned her back on it. Instead, she lifted a duffel bag Jonah's spare, already filled with mismatched gear, and slung it over her shoulder. Jonah looked at her, pretending not to grin. "You sure?" he asked. Anna nodded. "I've had enough of being owned. I'd rather belong." He offered his hand. This time, she took it. Her grip was firm, warm. Real. Weeks later, in a debrief chamber deep within Arco's citadel, scientists reviewed corrupted mission data and irregular biometric logs. Epsilon 9's files were fragmented, scrambled between perfect execution and emotional anomalies, psychological drift, neurological decay, deviations. "Do we classify her as a failure?" one asked. "No," replied the lead researcher. "We classify her as unrecoverable." The record was archived, buried, forgotten. But out beyond the Saturn rim, in a small outpost on Ganymede, laughter echoed across a mess hall as Anna, dressed in patched armor and thermal boots, fumbled through a hand-to-hand sparring match with Lena and promptly landed on her back. The soldiers erupted in cheers. Jonah leaned over her, grinning. "You good?" Anna stared up at the ceiling, breathing hard. Then she laughed. "I'll get better." And in that moment, surrounded by imperfection, bruised and laughing, she was perfect in a way Arco would never understand. She had been engineered to serve, but she had chosen to live.